The iron gate slammed shut behind her with a sound like a coffin closing. Elara Vance stumbled forward into the snow, barefoot, her wrists still burning from where the ropes had cut into her skin. The merchant's laughter echoed behind her. Payment received, transaction complete. 20 gold pieces. That's what a life was worth when your stepmother needed to cover a debt. Ahead, through the blizzard, something moved. A rider, cloaked in black, his stallion's breath making ghosts in the frozen air. Duke Cassian Dryke. The name alone made hardened soldiers check their shadows. He wasn't here to save anyone, he never was. But tonight, for reasons he couldn't name and would later regret trying to understand, he reined his horse to a stop and stared down at the girl bleeding into the snow. This is where everything changed. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The cold was a living thing. It crawled up Elara's legs, wrapped around her ribs, squeezed until breathing felt like swallowing glass. She'd stopped shivering an hour ago, or maybe it was 5 minutes. Time had gone soft and strange, and that's when she knew. This was it. The end. Not dramatic, not fair, just done. Funny how the mind works when the body's shutting down. She didn't think about warmth or rescue. She thought about her father, Rowan Vance, the Lionheart of Grenfall Pass. Dead 6 years now, but still more alive in her memory than anyone she'd known since. He used to say the cold wasn't the enemy, it was indifference. Cold's just honest, he'd told her once, wrapping his cloak around her shoulders during a winter march. It's people who'll freeze you from the inside out. She'd been 12 then, didn't understand. She understood now. The merchant who dragged her here, Grevin, fat and sweating even in winter, had barely looked at her when he shoved her into the snow. Stay put. The buyer will be along soon enough. You run, I'll find you. And what happens next will make this feel like a mercy. She hadn't run. Where would she go? Back to the house that stopped being home the day her father died? Back to Isolde, her stepmother, whose smile had curdled into something sharp and hungry the moment the funeral ended? Back to Tavin, her stepbrother, whose eyes followed her around rooms in a way that made her skin crawl? No. Better the snow. At least the snow was clean. She closed her eyes. Somewhere in the distance she heard hoofbeats. Probably the buyer. Grevin had mentioned a collector from the southern estates, which was code, everyone knew, for the kind of men who purchased girls the way you'd purchase cattle. She wondered, in a distant sort of way, if they'd be disappointed when they found her already half dead. Would they demand a refund? The thought almost made her laugh. The hoofbeats stopped. Silence, except for the wind screaming through the skeletal trees. Then, footsteps, boots crunching snow. Heavy, deliberate. A voice, low and edged like a blade fresh from the whetstone. What in hell's name is this? Not Grevin, someone else. Elara tried to open her eyes, but her lashes had frozen together. She felt more than saw the figure crouching beside her. Leather and wool. The smell of horse and steel and something else. Smoke, maybe, or old blood. Girl, can you hear me? She managed a sound, not quite a word. Quite. Christ, the voice muttered. Not gently, more like irritation, the tone of a man who'd stumbled onto a mess he didn't want to clean up. Who did this? She still couldn't see him, but she heard him stand, heard him turn, heard something else. Another set of footsteps, lighter, faster. Your Grace? A younger voice, nervous. That's just some vagrant, sir. We should keep moving. The storm's getting worse. Does she look like a vagrant to you, Lieutenant? A pause. I don't... She's got rope burns on her wrists, fresh. And those aren't rags she's wearing. That's a house dress, decent fabric. Somebody put her here. With respect, Your Grace, it's not our concern. If we don't reach the border garrison by dawn, I'll decide what's my concern. The sharpness in those words could have split stone. Elara felt herself being lifted, not gently exactly, but not roughly either. Efficient. The way you'd pick up something breakable that you didn't particularly want but couldn't leave behind. Get a blanket from my pack, the first voice said, and build a fire, now. Your Grace, we don't have time. Now, Lieutenant. The younger man scrambled away. Elara felt herself lowered near something warm. A horse, maybe, blocking the wind. Then fabric wrapped around her, thick and heavy. Wool. Good quality. The kind Isolde used to hoard for herself in Tavin, leaving Elara with threadbare cotton that let the drafts through. Breathe, the voice said. Slowly. Don't try to talk. She hadn't been trying, couldn't if she wanted to. Hands, rough, calloused, rubbed her arms through the blanket, trying to force circulation back into limbs that had gone numb. It hurt. She made a sound, choked and small. I know it hurts. That's good. Means you're still alive enough to feel it. Not exactly comforting, but there was something almost practical about it, like he was stating a fact, not offering sympathy. Slowly, painfully, her eyes unstuck. The world came into focus in pieces. Snow, trees, a small fire crackling to life a few feet away. The younger man, a soldier in ducal colors, feeding it kindling with shaking hands, and the man crouched in front of her, Duke Cassian Drake. She'd never seen him in person, but she'd heard the stories. Everyone had. The Frost Duke, the executioner's hand, the man who'd put down 3 rebellions before his 30th birthday, who'd hanged traitors from the walls of their own keeps, who smiled about as often as corpses did. He looked exactly like she'd imagined. And nothing like it. Tall, even crouching, broad through the shoulders, dark hair, longer than fashion dictated, pulled back and already coming loose in the wind, a face that might have been handsome if it wasn't set in a permanent scowl, sharp jaw, straight nose, eyes the color of slate before a storm. Maybe 40, maybe younger. Hard to tell with men like that. War-aged some people fast, others it just sharpened. He was staring at her wrists. Who tied these? He asked. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed sand. Merchant? She managed. Barely a whisper. Grevin. He said, I don't need his life story. Where is he now? He left. Said someone was coming to collect me. Something flickered across the Duke's face. Not quite anger, more like recognition. The look of a man who'd just confirmed a suspicion he'd been hoping was wrong. Lieutenant, he called, not looking away from her. How far to the nearest estate? Blackwood Hall, Your Grace. Maybe 2 miles north. Who holds it? Lord Merrick Voss, sir. Voss? Cassian said the name the way you'd say plague. Of course it is. That bastard's fingerprints are all over this. Your Grace, I don't follow. You don't have to. He stood, still watching Elara. Can you ride? She blinked. I don't. Can. You ride. Yes. She'd ridden with her father years ago before everything fell apart. I think so. Good enough. He turned to the lieutenant. Get her on my horse. We're taking her with us. The lieutenant's face went pale. Sir, we can't just... There are protocols, questions of jurisdiction, and I'm the Duke. My jurisdiction is anywhere I damn well say it is. Cassian's voice dropped into something cold and flat. You want to argue about it, Lieutenant? Fine. We'll revisit this conversation after I've had you flogged for insubordination. Your choice. The lieutenant swallowed. No, sir. Excellent. Then move. Elara watched this exchange in a daze, her mind struggling to catch up. He was taking her? Why? She was nobody, less than nobody, a piece of sold property abandoned in the snow. Cassian crouched again, meeting her eyes. What's your name? Elara. Her voice was steadier now, warming along with the rest of her. Elara Vance. He went very still. For a moment, just a flash, gone almost before she registered it, something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. But then it was gone, replaced by that same stony mask. Vance, he repeated, slowly, like he was tasting the word. Yes. Any relation to Rowan Vance? The knight? Her chest tightened. He was my father. The Duke stared at her, just stared. The wind howled, the fire popped, the lieutenant shifted uncomfortably. Finally, Cassian spoke. Your father saved my life. Elara blinked. What? Grenfall Pass, 8 years ago. I was a captain then, leading a scouting unit into enemy territory. We got ambushed, 20 men against 200. Should have been a massacre. Would have been. Except your father rallied a defense long enough for reinforcements to arrive. He held the line even after he took a spear through the shoulder, even after his horse went down. I owe him the fact that I'm still breathing. She didn't know what to say. Her father had never mentioned this. Then again, he'd never talked much about his battles. The past is the past, he used to say. No use carrying it around like baggage. I heard he died a few years back, Cassian continued. Fever, wasn't it? Yes. The word came out thick. She swallowed. 3 years ago. And now his daughter's being sold in the snow. His jaw tightened. Who did this? Not the merchant. Who sold you? She hesitated. Shame coiled in her stomach, hot and sick. My stepmother is old. She had debts, gambling debts, and I was convenient. It wasn't a question. Elara nodded. Cassian stood again, and this time when he spoke, his voice carried the kind of cold fury that made grown men reconsider their life choices. Where is she now, this stepmother of yours? At home, Greystone Manor, in the Vale district. And she just sold you to settle a bet. It wasn't... Elara stopped. What was she doing? Defending Isolde? The woman who'd looked her in the eye 2 days ago and said, You've been a burden long enough. Time you earned your keep. Yes, she said quietly. She sold me. The Duke turned to his lieutenant. Change of plans. We're not going to the garrison. The lieutenant looked like he might cry. Your Grace, we're going to the Vale district. I want to have a conversation with Lady Isolde Vance. Sir, with respect, that's outside our route, and the Marshal specifically ordered... The Marshal can kiss my frozen ass. Cassian swung himself onto his horse, a massive black destrier that looked like it could kick down a wall, and reached down toward Elara. Come on, up. She stared at his hand. Scarred knuckles. Calluses that spoke of decades holding a sword. This was insane. She was being pulled into something way above her head, and she had no idea where it was going or what would happen when they got there. But what choice did she have? She took his hand. He hauled her up behind him with startling ease, then kicked the horse into motion before she even had time to settle. The world lurched. She grabbed onto his cloak, knuckles white, heart hammering. Behind them, the lieutenant scrambled to mount his own horse, muttering what sounded like a prayer. They rode hard through the storm. Elara pressed her face against the Duke's back, trying to shield herself from the wind. He smelled like leather and steel and wood smoke, sharp, clean, nothing like the perfumed oils Isolde used to mask the stench of wine and desperation. Why are you doing this? She asked, had to shout to be heard over the wind. Doing what? Helping me. You don't know me. I knew your father. That's enough. It's been 8 years. You don't owe him anything. I owe him everything. Cassian's voice was flat, final. And even if I didn't, selling a knight's daughter like livestock, that's not justice, that's rot. And rot spreads if you don't cut it out. She didn't argue, partly because arguing with the Frost Duke seemed like a spectacularly bad idea. Partly because, deep down, some tiny part of her that had been drowning for 3 years was suddenly, desperately hoping he meant it. They reached the Vale district just as the church bells struck midnight. Greystone Manor sat at the end of a wide street, a ugly, sprawling house that had seen better days. The paint was peeling, the gardens were overgrown. The whole place had the look of genteel decay, money that used to be there, clinging to respectability by its fingernails. Cassian dismounted and pulled Elara down after him. Stay close. She nodded, numb. He marched up to the front door and pounded on it hard enough to rattle the frame. Open up, ducal business! A long silence, then shuffling footsteps. The door cracked open, revealing a bleary-eyed servant, old Osric, who'd worked for her father and somehow stayed on even after Isolde took over. Osric's eyes went wide. Lady Elara? Is that... Where's Isolde? Cassian demanded. She's asleep, sir. It's the middle of the night. Then wake her up, now. Osric stammered something, but the Duke was already pushing past him into the house. Elara followed, feeling like a ghost walking through her own haunted past. Everything looked the same. The faded tapestries, the warped floorboards, the portrait of her father over the mantel, eyes kind and sad. Isolde appeared at the top of the stairs, wrapped in a silk robe, her hair in curling papers. She looked older than Elara remembered, harder, the lines around her mouth deeper. What in the name of... She saw Elara, her face went white, then red. How did you... What are you doing here? Funny, Cassian said mildly. I was about to ask you the same thing, about why your stepdaughter was left to freeze to death in the snow after being sold to a trafficker. Isolde's mouth opened, closed. I don't know what she told you, but save it. The Duke's voice could have cut glass. I know exactly what happened. What I don't know yet is how deep this goes. So here's how this works. You're going to sit down and you're going to tell me everything, every name, every transaction, every piece of filth you're connected to. And if you lie to me, he smiled. It was the least comforting smile Elara had ever seen. Well, let's just say I've gotten very good at spotting lies, and I don't handle them gently. Isolde drew herself up, trying for indignation. You can't just barge into my home and... I'm the Duke of Draymar. I can do whatever I want. This is harassment. I'll file a complaint with the magistrate. The magistrate works for me. Isolde faltered. Her eyes darted to the hallway behind her like she was calculating escape routes. Don't, Cassian said. You won't make it to the back door. A door slammed somewhere upstairs. Footsteps. Running. The Duke sighed. Lieutenant. The soldier appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath. Sir? Someone just ran. Probably out the east side. Bring them back. Alive, preferably, but I'm not picky. Yes, sir. The lieutenant took off. Cassian turned back to Isolde. That your son? Tavin, was it? She didn't answer. Didn't need to. Thought so. He gestured to a chair. Sit. Isolde sat. She had no choice. You didn't say no to a man like Cassian Drake, not unless you had a death wish. Elara stood by the door, trembling. Not from cold this time. From something else. Something that felt horribly like hope. Cassian pulled up a chair across from Isolde, close enough that their knees almost touched. Intimidation tactic. Elara recognized it from watching her father negotiate with rival lords. Get in their space, make them uncomfortable, force mistakes. Let's start simple, the Duke said. How much did you get for her? I don't... How? Much. Isolde swallowed. 20 gold. 20. He said it like an obscenity. A knight's daughter, 20 gold. What was the debt? 35, plus interest. Who holds the debt? Silence. Cassian leaned forward. I can do this all night, Lady Vance. I've interrogated enemy spies. I've broken hardened soldiers. You really think you're going to outlast me? Isolde's hands twisted in her lap. Lord Merrick Voss. There it was. The Duke sat back, nodding slowly. Of course. Voss. That snake's been running half the illegal trade in this province for years, and no one's been able to touch him because he's got friends in the capital. His eyes narrowed. How long have you been in bed with him? It's not like that. How long? 2 years, maybe 3. I had expenses and the estate wasn't bringing in enough and Merrick offered to help. Help? Cassian's laugh was bitter. Is that what you call it when a man loans you money at 20% interest and then suggests you sell your stepdaughter when you can't pay? Isolde flinched. That's what happened, isn't it? Cassian pressed. He set this up, got you in deep, then offered a solution. And you took it because it was easier than facing what you'd become. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're a coward and a fool, and your husband would be ashamed. That hit like a slap. Isolde's face crumpled. For a moment she looked almost human, almost sorry. Then she rallied, venom creeping back into her voice. Rowan's been dead for 3 years. And you know what he left me? Debts and crumbling estate. A title that means nothing. I did what I had to do to survive. You sold his daughter. She's not even his real daughter. She's from his first marriage, and Elara's hands clenched. I'm standing right here. Isolde barely glanced at her. You've been a burden since the day I married your father. Eating our food, wearing our clothes, taking up space. Elara's voice shook. It was my father's house. His money, his name. You married into it, and the second he was gone, you started selling off everything he built. To keep us alive. To keep you in silk and wine. Isolde surged to her feet. You ungrateful little... Sit down, Cassian said quietly. Isolde sat. The Duke looked at Elara. For the first time since they'd entered the house, something almost like sympathy crossed his face. Go upstairs. Find whatever belongings you want to keep. You're not staying here tonight. Where am I supposed to go? My estate, for now, until I figure out what the hell to do with you. Elara stared. Your estate? You got a better idea? She didn't. She really, really didn't. Go, Cassian said, before I change my mind. She went. Climbing the stairs felt surreal. Everything was exactly where she'd left it, but also wrong, like walking through a memory that didn't quite fit anymore. Her room was at the end of the hall, small, drafty, with a narrow bed and a single window that looked out onto the dead gardens. She grabbed a bag and started throwing things in. Clothes, mostly. A few books. The silver locket her father had given her for her 16th birthday. Not much. She'd never had much. Downstairs she could hear voices. Cassian, low and hard, and Isolde, shrill and desperate. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear enough. Interrogation. She was almost done packing when the door creaked open behind her. She spun. Tavin stood in the doorway. Her stepbrother had always been a weasel of a man. Thin, sharp-faced, with eyes that didn't quite meet yours. He'd gotten worse in the past year, spending his days drinking and his nights doing whatever it was men like him did when they thought no one was watching. Now he looked furious. You brought the Duke here, he hissed. Do you have any idea what you've done? I didn't bring anyone. He found me. And you just... What? Told him everything? Sold us out? You sold me first. Tavin took a step into the room. That was business. You were always too stupid to understand. Get out! This is my house. No, Elara said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. It was my father's house. You just live in it like a parasite. His face twisted. He lunged. She didn't think. Just grabbed the nearest thing, a candlestick from the dresser, and swung. It connected with his shoulder. Not hard enough to do real damage, but enough to make him stagger back, cursing. You bitch! Footsteps pounded up the stairs. The lieutenant appeared in the doorway, sword drawn. Step away from her. Now! Tevin raised his hands, backing off. I didn't... Out. Downstairs. Move. Tevin shot Elara a look of pure hatred, then slunk past the lieutenant and down the hall. The soldier turned to her. You all right, miss? She nodded shakily. Yeah, I'm fine. His Grace wants to leave in 5 minutes. You ready? She looked around the room one last time. At the faded curtains, the threadbare rug, the stain on the ceiling that had been there since she was 10. This place had stopped being home a long time ago. Maybe it never really was. Yeah, she said. I'm ready. They left Greystone Manor as the snow finally stopped falling. Elara sat behind Cassian again, her bag clutched to her chest, watching the house disappear into the darkness. Isolde and Tavin stood in the doorway, framed by lamplight, looking small and angry and utterly defeated. She didn't feel triumphant, she just felt tired. Where are we going? She asked. Draymar Keep, Cassian said. My seat, 3 days' ride north. You'll stay there while I finish what I started. Which is? Taking down Voss. And everyone else involved in this trafficking ring. You think it's bigger than just him? I know it is. Men like Voss don't operate alone. They've got networks, suppliers, buyers, enforcers, people who look the other way because they're getting paid to. This goes deep, and I'm going to rip it out by the roots. His voice was calm, matter of fact. Like he was describing how to fix a broken fence, not dismantle a criminal empire. Elara almost believed he could do it. Why do you care? She asked. I mean, really, it can't just be because of my father. Cassian was quiet for a long moment. The horses' hooves crunched through the snow. The lieutenant rode behind them, silent. Finally, the Duke spoke. I spent most of my life fighting wars. Big, ugly, necessary wars. I'm good at it. I've won battles, put down rebellions, kept the realm from tearing itself apart. And I always told myself that was enough, that I was doing my duty. He paused. But while I was out there fighting, things like this were happening, in my own province, under my nose, And I didn't see it, didn't want to see it, maybe, because it was easier to focus on enemies I could kill with a sword. He shifted in the saddle. Your father taught me something back at Grenfall. He said the measure of a man isn't how well he fights for himself. It's how hard he fights for people who can't fight back. I didn't understand that then. I was too young, too angry. But I understand it now. Elara didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. They rode on into the night, leaving the past behind and heading towards something uncertain and new. Draymar Keep rose out of the northern hills like a clenched fist. Elara saw it first as a smudge of gray against the dawn sky, then as something more solid. Towers, walls, battlements carved from the same dark stone that gave the whole place a look of permanent winter. No banners flew, no decorative nonsense, just raw, functional power. Home sweet home, Cassian muttered, guiding his horse through the main gates. Guards snapped to attention as they passed. Stable hands emerged from the shadows to take the horses. Everyone moved with the kind of precision that came from discipline, not fear, though Elara suspected there was plenty of fear mixed in too. The lieutenant dismounted, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. Your Grace, I should report to the marshal. Tell him I'll brief him myself, after I've slept. Cassian swung down from the saddle, then turned to help Elara. You, come on. She followed him through a maze of corridors, stone floors, high ceilings, torches burning in iron sconces. The place was massive, cold, impersonal, exactly what she'd expected from a man like the Duke. He stopped in front of a heavy wooden door and pushed it open. Guest quarters. You'll stay here until I figure out what to do with you. The room was nice. Better than nice. A real bed with actual blankets, a fireplace already crackling with fresh wood, a window that looked out over the mountains. Clean, warm, safe. Elara set her bag down slowly, like she was afraid it might all disappear if she moved too fast. I don't understand. What's not to understand? It's a room. You sleep in it. No, I mean, why are you doing this? You saved me, brought me here. You're going after Isolde and Voss. I'm nobody. I can't pay you back. Cassian leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. He looked exhausted. You want the truth? Yes? I don't know. He said it bluntly, like admitting a tactical error. I should have left you in the snow. Would have been simpler. But I didn't, and now here we are, so you might as well get comfortable while I clean up the mess. And after? After what? After you take down Voss, what happens to me then? He shrugged. That's a problem for future me. Present me needs sleep. He started to turn away, then stopped. Don't leave the keep. My people know you're under my protection, but there are others out there who'd see you as leverage. Stay inside, stay safe. I'm not a prisoner? Prisoners get locked doors. Yours doesn't lock from the outside. He paused. But if you run, I can't help you. Understand? She nodded. He left without another word. Elara stood in the center of the room for a long time, just breathing. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and cried. Not from sadness exactly, but from the sheer overwhelming weight of the past 3 days crashing down all at once. She slept for 14 hours straight. When she woke, there was food waiting on a table by the window. Bread, cheese, roasted meat, fruit that actually looked fresh. A note scrawled in messy handwriting. Eat. You look half dead. See, she ate. Then she bathed in the washroom down the hall, scrubbing away 3 days of grime and fear. Then she slept some more. It was 2 days before she saw Cassian again. He found her in the library, a cavernous room filled with more books than she'd seen in her entire life. She'd been trying to distract herself by reading, but her mind kept wandering back to Isolde, to Tavin, to the image of herself freezing in the snow. You read, Cassian observed, appearing in the doorway like a particularly grumpy ghost. Elara jumped, nearly dropping her book. You scared me. Good instincts. Never let your guard down. He walked over, glancing at the spine of her book. Military history. Interesting choice. My father used to read it. I thought, I don't know, maybe it would help me understand him better. Cassian pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. He looked different than he had on the road. Cleaner, but somehow more tired. Like sleep had only highlighted how exhausted he actually was. I've been investigating, he said without preamble. Your stepmother, Voss, the whole operation. It's worse than I thought. Elara's stomach clenched. How much worse? Voss isn't just running girls through his estate. He's got a network, safe houses, transport routes, buyers across 3 provinces. And he's got protection, high-level protection, people in the capital who make sure investigations go nowhere. Can you stop him? Eventually, but it'll take time and it won't be clean. He leaned back, studying her. I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Okay? How much do you know about your father's death? The question hit like a punch. What? He died of fever. Everyone knows that. That's what the official report says, but I've been digging and something doesn't add up. Cassian pulled a folded paper from his coat and slid it across the table. This is the physician's record. Read it. Elara unfolded the document with shaking hands. The writing was cramped, technical, but one phrase jumped out at her. Symptoms inconsistent with common fever. Rapid deterioration suggests possible toxin exposure. Her mouth went dry. Toxin? The physician noted it. Then he died 3 months later. Convenient. You think he was killed? My father was... I think someone wanted him out of the way. And I think your stepmother knows more than she's saying. Cassian's eyes were hard. Rowan Vance was a decorated knight. He had connections, influence, a reputation. While he was alive, Isolde couldn't touch his estate or his money. But once he was gone, she inherited everything. Elara's voice came out flat, numb. She married him for his title, and when he wouldn't die fast enough, she... I don't have proof, not yet, but I'm working on it. Elara stared at the document, reading the words over and over until they blurred. Her father. Poisoned. By the woman he'd married, the woman he'd trusted to care for his daughter after he was gone. Something inside her shifted, hardened. I want to help, she said. Cassian raised an eyebrow. Help how? With the investigation. With taking down Voss. I know things. About Isolde, about the house. About people who visited. I can... No. But absolutely not. You're a civilian. You've been through enough. I'm not dragging you into this. I'm already in it. Elara slammed her hand on the table. They sold me. They killed my father. You think I can just sit here reading books while you handle everything? That's exactly what I think you should do. Well, I don't care what you think. She stood, anger flooding through her veins like fire. I'm not some fragile thing that needs protecting. I'm the daughter of Rowan Vance, and if you're going after the people who destroyed my family, I'm coming with you. Cassian stared at her. For a moment she thought he might actually smile, but he didn't. You have no training, no experience. You'd be a liability. Then train me. I don't have time to make time, or I'll go after them myself. That got his attention. He stood slowly, closing the distance between them until they were almost nose to nose. You threatening me, girl? I'm telling you the truth. You can help me do this smart, or I'll do it stupid. Your choice. They stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. The library was so quiet, Elara could hear her own heartbeat. Finally, Cassian stepped back. You're insane. Maybe. And stubborn as hell. Definitely. He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely torn for the first time since she'd met him. If, and that's a massive if, I let you help, you follow my orders, no exceptions. You do exactly what I say when I say it. Understood? Understood. And if I tell you to run, you run. No heroics. Fine. I'm serious, Elara. This isn't a game. Voss has people who'll kill you without blinking. Hell, they'll probably enjoy it. I know. He studied her for a long moment. You really are Rowan's daughter, aren't you? What does that mean? He was stubborn too. Got him killed in the end. Cassian sighed. All right, fine. You can help, but we start small, information gathering, nothing dangerous, and the second things get messy, you're out. Agreed? Agreed. I'm going to regret this. Probably. He almost smiled. Almost. They started the next day. Cassian brought her to a secure room in the lower levels of the keep. No windows, thick walls, a single table covered in maps and documents. His inner circle was already there. The lieutenant from the road, whose name turned out to be Gareth, An older woman with sharp eyes and sharper instincts named Captain Mira, and a wiry man with ink-stained fingers introduced as Marcus, the Duke's spymaster. "This is Elara Vance," Cassian said, gesturing to her. "She's consulting on the Voss investigation. Treat her like any other asset." Mira's gaze swept over Elara, assessing. "The girl from the snow." "The same. She looks like trouble." "She is. Let's move on." Cassian spread a map across the table. "Marcus, what have you got?" The spymaster adjusted his spectacles. 3 confirmed safe houses in the city, 2 transport routes, one by river, one by road, and a list of buyers, though most are using aliases. "How many girls are we talking about?" "Best estimate? 30 to 40 moving through the network at any given time." Elara's stomach turned. 30 to 40. Girls like her, maybe younger, maybe already dead. "Where are they holding them?" she asked. Marcus pointed to a spot on the map. "Main hub is here, Blackwood Hall, Voss's estate. From there, they're distributed to the safe houses before being moved to buyers." "How do we get inside?" "We don't. Place is a fortress, guards, wards, layers of security. We'd need an army to breach it, and by the time we mobilized, they'd scatter." Cassian drummed his fingers on the table. "So we need leverage, something to force Voss into the open." "Or someone," Mira said, looking at Elara. Elara frowned. "What do you mean?" "You're Rowan Vance's daughter. Voss knew your father. They served together back in the day. If we let it slip that you're alive under the Duke's protection and asking questions about your father's death," she shrugged, "might rattle him, make him sloppy." "You want to use her as bait," Gareth said, horrified. "I want to use every tool we have, and right now, she's a damn good tool." Cassian shook his head. "Too risky. If Voss gets wind that she's a threat, he'll send someone to eliminate her before we can—" "Let him try," Elara interrupted. Everyone turned to stare at her. "I'm serious," she continued. "If using me as bait gets us closer to taking him down, then do it. I'm not afraid." "You should be," Marcus muttered. "Maybe. But I'm more afraid of doing nothing." She looked at Cassian. "You said I could help. This is how I help." The Duke's jaw tightened. "You have no idea what you're volunteering for." "Then explain it to me." He did. In detail. The plan was brutal in its simplicity. Leak information that Elara was alive and cooperating with the Duke's investigation. Let Voss panic. Wait for him to make a move, either to silence her or to cover his tracks. And when he did, they'd be ready. "It's a trap," Cassian finished, "with you as the lure. Which means you'll be in danger every second until we spring it." "How much danger?" "Assassination attempts, kidnapping, torture if they get their hands on you." He didn't sugarcoat it. "We'll have guards on you at all times, but there's always a chance they'll slip through. Always." Elara's hands were shaking. She clenched them into fists. "Do it." "Elara, do it, please." Cassian looked at the others. Mira nodded. Marcus shrugged. Gareth looked like he wanted to object, but couldn't find the words. "All right," the Duke said quietly. "We'll do it your way. But if this goes wrong, if you get hurt, then that's on me," Elara finished. "Not you." He didn't look convinced. They spent the next week preparing. Cassian assigned 2 guards to Elara, silent, competent men who followed her everywhere like shadows. She hated it, at first, the constant scrutiny, but she got used to it, had to. Marcus started spreading rumors. Carefully, subtly. Whispers in taverns, coded messages to informants. Within days, word was out. The Vance girl survived. She's with the Duke. She's talking. The first attempt came on the 8th day. Elara was in the courtyard practicing basic self-defense moves with Captain Mira. The captain was a brutal teacher. No patience, no mercy. Just relentless drilling until Elara's muscles screamed. "Again!" Mira barked. "You're too slow. If someone grabs you, you've got maybe 2 seconds to react. Again!" Elara reset, trying to ignore the burning in her arms. She'd just started the drill when one of her guards shouted a warning. Something whistled through the air. Mira moved like lightning, shoving Elara to the ground. A crossbow bolt thudded into the spot where she'd been standing, burying itself in the dirt. "Sniper!" one of the guards yelled. "North Tower!" Chaos erupted. Guards swarmed the courtyard. Mira hauled Elara to her feet and half-dragged, half-carried her toward cover. Elara's ears were ringing. Her heart was trying to claw its way out of her chest. They made it to the armory just as a second bolt shattered against the doorframe. "Stay down!" Mira ordered, slamming the door shut. Elara pressed herself against the wall, gasping. "What? Who?" "Voss's people. Or someone working for him." Mira checked the door, then turned back to her. "You all right?" "I think so." "Good, because that's just the beginning." She was right. Over the next 3 days, there were 2 more attempts. A poisoned meal that one of the kitchen staff caught just in time. A suspicious servant who turned out to be carrying a knife and a vial of something nasty. Each time, Cassian's people intercepted. Each time, Elara walked away unscathed. But it was wearing on her. The constant vigilance. The knowledge that someone, somewhere, was planning her death. She barely slept. When she did, she dreamed of crossbow bolts and snow in her father's face. Cassian found her in the library late one night, staring at nothing. "Can't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. He sat down across from her, same spot as before. "You want to call this off? Say the word, and we'll find another way." "No." "Elara." I said no. She met his eyes. "I knew this would be hard. I'm not backing out now. You're allowed to be scared." "I am scared. I'm terrified. But I'm also angry, and angry is keeping me going." She leaned forward. "Is it working, the plan?" "Yeah, Voss is rattled. Marcus intercepted a message this morning, coded, but we broke it. Voss is calling a meeting with his suppliers. Tomorrow night at Blackwood Hall." "That's good, right? It's an opening. If we move fast, we can hit them while they're all together, cut the head off the snake and burn the rest." Cassian's expression darkened. "But it's also a trap. Voss knows we're watching. This could be his way of drawing us out. So what do? We spring his trap before he springs ours." He pulled out a map, pointing to Blackwood Hall. "Here's the plan." The plan was insane. Cassian and a strike team would infiltrate Blackwood Hall during the meeting. Elara would stay behind, safe in the keep, under heavy guard. They'd capture Voss and as many of his conspirators as possible, seize any documents or evidence, and dismantle the entire network in one night. Clean, efficient, impossible to screw up. Except Elara had other ideas. The night of the raid, she waited until her guards were distracted. Shift change, a brief window where they weren't watching her door, and slipped out. She'd stolen a servant's cloak from the laundry, plain and unremarkable. Pulled the hood up. Walked through the keep like she belonged there. No one stopped her. She made it to the stables, saddled a horse, clumsily, but well enough, and rode out through the eastern gate just as the alarm bells started ringing behind her. Too late. She was already gone. The ride to Blackwood Hall took 2 hours. By the time she arrived, the assault was already underway. She could hear it from half a mile away, shouting, steel on steel, the crash of something heavy breaking. She left the horse tied in the trees and approached on foot, heart hammering. The estate was pandemonium. Guards fighting Cassian's soldiers, fires burning in the courtyard, bodies on the ground, some moving, some not. Elara ducked behind a wall, trying to get her bearings. Where was Cassian? Where was Voss? A door burst open to her left. A man stumbled out, old, fat, richly dressed. Lord Merrick Voss. She recognized him from descriptions. He was running. Without thinking, Elara stepped into his path. Voss skidded to a halt, eyes wide. You're supposed to be dead?" Elara's voice was steady, cold. "Sorry to disappoint." He lunged at her. She'd practiced this. Drilled it with Mira 100 times. Sidestep, grab his arm, use his momentum against him. Except theory and practice were different things, and Voss was bigger and stronger than she'd expected. They hit the ground hard. Elara's head cracked against stone. Stars exploded across her vision. Voss's hands closed around her throat. "You stupid girl," he hissed. "You think you can ruin me? You're nothing. Your father was nothing, and when I'm done with you..." A boot connected with his face. Voss flew backward, howling. Cassian stood over him, sword drawn, absolutely furious. "You," he said to Voss. Then he turned to Elara. "And you? What the hell are you doing here?" Elara coughed, gasping for air. "Helping. I told you to stay at the keep. I know. You could have been killed. But I wasn't. Cassian looked like he wanted to strangle her himself, but there wasn't time. Voss was crawling away, bleeding and desperate. Finish this later, Cassian growled. He grabbed Voss by the collar and hauled him upright. You're coming with me. The raid lasted another hour. By the end, Cassian's forces had captured 17 people. Voss, 3 of his suppliers, and a dozen enforcers. They also seized documents, ledgers, correspondence, evidence, mountains of it. Elara sat on the steps of Blackwood Hall, shivering despite the fires still burning around her. Gareth appeared with a blanket, draping it over her shoulders. You're in so much trouble, he said, not unkindly. I know. He's going to yell, a lot. I know. Cassian emerged from the hall, covered in soot and blood. None of it his, from the look of it. He spotted Elara and marched over. She stood, met his gaze. Before you start, she began. Shut up. I said shut up. He grabbed her shoulders, not gently, and looked her over, checking for injuries, she realized. Are you hurt? I'm fine. You're not fine. You're an idiot. But his hands were gentle as he turned her head, inspecting the bruise already forming on her temple. Mira teach you nothing about following orders? She taught me to fight. Not well enough. I stopped Voss from escaping. You got lucky. He could have killed you. But he didn't, Elara's voice cracked. I needed to be here. I needed to see, to know. Cassian's expression softened, just slightly. I get it, but if you ever pull something like this again, I'll lock you in a cell myself. Understood? Understood. He let go, stepping back. Come on, we're done here. They rode back to Draymar Keep as the sun rose, painting the snow gold and pink. Voss and his conspirators were bound and gagged in a wagon, surrounded by guards. The ledgers and documents were secured in lockboxes. It wasn't over. Not yet. There were still trials to arrange, testimonies to gather, loose ends to tie up. But for the first time in 3 years, Elara felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. Cassian rode beside her, silent and brooding as always. But when she glanced over, she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What? She asked. Nothing. He looked away. Just thinking. About? Your father. He'd be proud of you. Or furious, probably both. Elara smiled despite herself. Yeah, probably. They rode on, and behind them, the first real crack appeared in the network that had destroyed so many lives, including hers. The interrogation started the next morning. Cassian set up in the dungeons beneath Draymar Keep, not the holding cells, but the deep ones, the kind with stone walls so thick you could scream yourself hoarse and nobody would hear. Elara wasn't supposed to be there. He'd made that clear. But she came anyway, standing in the shadows at the back of the room while the Duke worked. Voss sat chained to a chair in the center, looking smaller than he had at Blackwood Hall. Sweat dripped down his face despite the cold. His fine clothes were torn and filthy. Let's try this again, Cassian said, voice flat. Who else is involved? Names. I told you, I don't... Cassian slammed his fist on the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Don't waste my time. We found the ledgers. We know there are others. High-ranking officials, nobles, people protecting you. Give me names and maybe I'll recommend clemency. Voss laughed. It came out wet and broken. You think they'll let you touch them? You're a duke, Drykey, not a king. You don't have the authority. Watch me. They'll bury you. One word to the capital and you'll be recalled, stripped of your title, thrown in a cell just like this one. Voss leaned forward as much as his chains allowed. You're out of your depth. Cassian's expression didn't change. Marcus. The spymaster stepped forward, holding a sheet of parchment. Lord Voss, we've been reviewing your correspondence. Interesting reading, especially the letters to Chancellor Aldrich Thorne. Voss went pale. Thorne, Cassian repeated. The king's own chancellor. The man who controls the treasury, appoints magistrates, oversees provincial governance. He tilted his head. Tell me, Voss, how long has Thorne been taking a cut of your operation? I don't know what your... 5 years, Marcus interrupted, reading from the document. According to this letter, dated 3 months ago, you paid him 8,000 gold to ensure continued cooperation from relevant authorities. That's not a bribe, that's a partnership. Elara's stomach twisted. The Chancellor, the second most powerful man in the realm. If he was involved, then Cassian was right. This went deeper than anyone had imagined. Cassian leaned down, getting in Voss's face. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to write a full confession. Every detail, every name, every transaction, and you're going to sign it in front of witnesses. And if I refuse, then I'll make sure the other prisoners know you're cooperating anyway. See how long you last when they think you're selling them out. Cassian straightened. Your choice. Confess and live in a cell, or stay silent and die in one. Either way, I'm taking Thorn down. Voss stared at him. You're insane. You can't touch the Chancellor. Watch me, Cassian said again. It took 3 more days to break him. Voss didn't crack all at once. It happened in pieces. A name here, a detail there, each one dragged out through hours of questioning. Cassian rotated interrogators to keep him off balance. Mira, Marcus, even Gareth, whose nervous energy made Voss twitch. Elara watched most of it. She knew she shouldn't. Knew it was wearing on her, seeing men reduced to sobbing wrecks, hearing them beg for mercy they didn't deserve. But she couldn't look away. These were the people who'd built the machine that sold her, who'd poisoned her father, who'd destroyed dozens, maybe hundreds of lives. She wanted to see them broken. On the 3rd day, Voss finally gave them what they needed. All right, he gasped, slumped in his chair. All right, I'll confess. Everything. Just stop. Please. Cassian gestured to Marcus, who produced parchment and ink. Start talking. Voss talked. He named 17 people. Nobles, magistrates, merchants, even 2 military officers. He described the network in nauseating detail, how girls were acquired, where they were held, how they were transported. He admitted to bribing officials, falsifying documents, arranging accidents for anyone who asked too many questions, and he confirmed what they'd suspected. Chancellor Thorn wasn't just complicit, he was the architect. The whole operation ran on his protection. Without him, it would have collapsed years ago. He wanted plausible deniability, Voss said, his voice hoarse. Never touched the merchandise himself. Never signed anything. Just collected his share and made sure the law looked the other way. How much? Cassian asked. 30% of everything. Marcus did the math in his head. That's over 200,000 gold. In 5 years. Cassian's jaw tightened. And the king knows nothing about this? The king's an old fool who cares more about his wine collection than governance. Thorn runs everything. Voss coughed. You go after him, you'll need proof, real proof, not just my word. We have the ledgers. Coded. Thorn's name never appears, just the benefactor. Any lawyer will argue it could mean anyone. Then we'll find more proof. There isn't any. Thorn's too careful. Voss managed a bitter smile. You're finished, Drakey. Even if you arrest him, even if you drag him before the king, he'll talk his way out. Men like him always do. Cassian didn't respond, just stood there, staring at Voss with an expression Elara couldn't read. Finally, he turned to Marcus. Get the confession in writing, every word. I want it signed, sealed, and witnessed. Already on it, Your Grace. Cassian walked out without another word. Elara followed him. She found him in the courtyard, staring at the mountains. Snow was falling again, light and lazy. He didn't turn when she approached. He's right, isn't he? She said quietly. About Thorn. You can't just arrest him. No, I can't. So what do we do? Cassian was silent for a long moment. I've been thinking about that, and I keep coming back to one option. Which is? Public execution. Elara blinked. What? Not literal execution, though I wouldn't mind. He turned to face her. I mean exposing him publicly, in a way he can't wriggle out of. Force him to answer for his crimes in front of the entire realm. How? A trial, a very public trial, in the capital, with every noble, magistrate, and curious citizen packed into the hall. We present the evidence, the ledgers, Voss's confession, testimony from survivors. Make it so damning, so undeniable that even Thorn's allies can't protect him. Elara frowned. He'll have lawyers. The best money can buy. I know, but we'll have something better. Cassian's eyes were hard. The truth, and witnesses willing to speak it. You mean the girls, the ones who were trafficked? If they're willing, I won't force anyone. He paused. But if even a few of them stand up and tell their stories, that's harder to dismiss than any ledger. What about me? Elara asked before she could stop herself. Cassian looked at her sharply. What about you? I could testify. I was sold. I know how it works. I could... No. Why not? Because putting you in front of Thorne's lawyers would be like throwing you to wolves. They'd tear you apart, question every detail, attack your credibility, drag your family through the mud. His voice softened slightly. You've been through enough. I can handle it. I'm sure you think you can, but trust me, you can't. Not this. Elara wanted to argue, but the look on his face stopped her. He wasn't being condescending. He was being honest, and maybe he was right. Fine, she said. So when do we leave for the capital? We don't. I go alone. That's not... Elara. He stepped closer, his expression serious. Listen to me. The capital's dangerous. Thorne has people everywhere. Assassins, informants, bought officials. If you come with me, you become a target, again. And I can't protect you there the way I can here. I don't need protection. Yes, you do. Whether you want to admit it or not. He sighed. Stay here. Help Mira coordinate the survivors. Make sure they're safe and willing to testify. That's how you help. She hated it. Hated being left behind while he rode into danger. But she also knew arguing wouldn't change his mind. All right, she said finally. But you come back, you hear me? You don't get to die playing hero. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. I'll try my best. He left 2 days later. Elara stood on the battlements, watching his contingent ride out, 20 soldiers, Marcus and Cassian himself at the head. They looked small against the snow and mountains, getting smaller with every minute. Captain Mira appeared beside her. He'll be fine. The Duke survived worse. Has he? 3 assassination attempts, 2 rebellions, and a bout of plague that killed half his regiment. Man's harder to kill than a cockroach. Mira paused. But you're not worried about him, are you? You're worried about what happens if he succeeds. Elara glanced at her. What do you mean? Taking down a chancellor? That's not just justice. That's a declaration of war against the entire political structure. Even if Cassian wins, there'll be consequences. People don't forget when you make them look weak. You think he shouldn't do it? I think he doesn't have a choice. Not anymore. He started this fight, and now he has to finish it. Mira's expression was unreadable. Just hope he's ready for what comes after. The days crawled by. Elara threw herself into work, helping Mira organize the survivors. There were 43 women and girls they'd recovered from Voss's network, some from the raid on Blackwood Hall, others from safe houses Marcus's people had raided in the aftermath. They were housed in the east wing of the keep, guarded and cared for, but traumatized. Getting them to talk was hard. Getting them to trust was harder. Elara sat with a girl named Sarah, maybe 16, hollow-eyed and quiet. They were in one of the sitting rooms, warm and safe, but Sarah kept glancing at the door like she expected someone to burst through. You don't have to tell me anything, Elara said gently. I wanted you to know you're safe here. No one's going to hurt you. Sarah didn't respond. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. The people who did this, they're locked up, and the Duke's going to make sure they pay for what they did. The Duke? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Why does he care? Because, Elara hesitated, because it's the right thing to do. People don't do the right thing, not without a reason. Then maybe his reason is that he's tired of watching evil people get away with it. Elara leaned forward. I was sold too, just like you. My stepmother sold me to settle a debt. I was left in the snow to die. Sarah looked at her for the first time. Really looked. The Duke found me, Elara continued. Saved me. And now he's trying to tear down the whole system that let this happen. But he needs help. He needs people willing to stand up and say what happened to them, to make sure the ones responsible can't lie their way out. They'll call us liars anyway. Maybe. But if enough of us speak, they can't ignore it. Elara reached out slowly, giving Sarah time to pull away. She didn't. You don't have to decide now. Just think about it. Sarah nodded. It was small, tentative, but it was something. Over the next week, Elara had similar conversations with a dozen other survivors. Some shut down completely, others cried. A few got angry, which Elara understood better than sympathy. By the time Marcus sent word from the capital, they had 17 women willing to testify. It wasn't all of them, but it was enough. The message from Marcus arrived on a cold morning, delivered by a courier who looked like he'd ridden through hell to get there. Mira read it first, her face darkening. Then she handed it to Elara. Trial set for 3 days hence. Thorn knows we're coming. Security will be tight. Cassian requests you send the witnesses under heavy escort. Survivors only. No one else. Too dangerous. Elara read it twice. What does he mean Thorn knows we're coming? Means the Chancellor is preparing a defense, probably gathering his own witnesses, bribing magistrates, calling in favors. Mira folded the letter. This is going to be ugly. Can we win? Depends on your definition of win. Legally? Maybe. Politically? She shrugged. That's a different battlefield. They prepared the convoy that afternoon. 17 survivors, 20 guards, and Captain Mira herself leading. Elara wanted to go, begged, actually. But Mira refused. You're too recognizable. Thorn's people see you. They'll know exactly what we're planning. You stay here. But that's an order from the Duke. Argue with him when he gets back. So Elara stayed. She watched the convoy leave from the same battlements where she'd watched Cassian ride out, watched them disappear into the horizon, watched the gates close behind them. The keep felt empty without them. She spent the next 2 days in a haze of anxiety. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, just paced her room, imagining every possible disaster. What if they were ambushed on the road? What if Thorn had the survivors killed before they reached the capital? What if the trial was rigged from the start? On the third day, a second courier arrived. This one looked worse than the first, bleeding from a gash on his arm, his horse half dead from exhaustion. "Where's Lady Vance?" he gasped. Elara rushed down to the courtyard. "I'm here. What happened?" The courier handed her a letter, sealed with Cassian's mark. She broke it open with shaking hands. "Elara, trial's tomorrow. Thorn's playing dirty. He's brought in witnesses of his own, people claiming Voss acted alone, that there's no evidence of higher conspiracy. We're holding our own, but it's close. If you're reading this, it means I'm still alive. Barely. Get word to the king if something happens to me. Don't let this die." See, her blood went cold. She looked at the courier. "How bad is it?" "Bad, my lady. There was an attempt on the Duke's life 2 nights ago. Poisoned wine. He didn't drink it, but his food taster did. Man's dead." The courier swayed. "They're not even hiding it anymore. Thorn wants him gone." Elara's mind raced. Cassian was in danger, real danger, and she was stuck here, useless. No, not useless. She turned to the nearest guard. "Saddle a horse, fast one, and get me a cloak." "My lady, you can't." "I can, and I will. Move." The guard hesitated, then obeyed. 20 minutes later, Elara was riding hard toward the capital, alone and terrified, but absolutely certain this was the right choice. She pushed the horse to its limits, stopping only to water it and grab a few hours of sleep in a roadside inn. The capital was a 2-day ride from Draymar Keep. She made it in 1.5. The city rose out of the plains like something from a nightmare. Massive walls, towers that scraped the sky, thousands of buildings packed together so tight it looked like one solid mass. Elara had never been here before. It was overwhelming. She found her way to the Hall of Justice by asking directions from wary-looking citizens. The building was impossible to miss. White marble, columns, steps leading up to bronze doors currently flanked by guards. A crowd had gathered outside. Hundreds of people, maybe more, all trying to get a glimpse of the trial. Elara pushed through them, hood up, trying not to draw attention. "Heard they've got 17 girls testifying." "Chancellor's going to walk, mark my words, men like him always do. Duke's got balls, I'll give him that, going after Thorn." She made it to the steps. A guard stopped her. "No entry. Trial's restricted." "I'm a witness," Elara said. "Name?" "Elara Vance." The guard checked a list, frowned. "You're not—" "Wait, Vance? As in the girl who was sold?" Yes, I need to get inside. You're supposed to be at Draymar Keep. Plans changed. Let me through. The guard looked uncertain. I need to verify it. There's no time. The trial's happening now, isn't it? He nodded reluctantly. Then let me in, please. Something in her voice must have convinced him. He stepped aside. Elara slipped through the bronze doors into chaos. The hall was packed. Nobles in fine clothes, magistrates in black robes, citizens crammed into every available space. At the front on a raised platform sat 3 judges, and below them, in the center of the room, stood 2 figures. Cassian Drake on one side, looking exhausted but defiant. Chancellor Aldrich Thorne on the other, calm and composed in expensive robes. Elara's stomach dropped. She'd arrived just in time. One of the judges, an old man with a voice like gravel, was speaking. Evidence presented is compelling, but circumstantial. Lord Voss's confession implicates the Chancellor, yes, but without corroboration, it is the word of a condemned criminal against that of a respected official. Respected, Cassian spat. The man's a thief and a monster. Your Grace, you will address the bench with respect, or you will be removed. Cassian's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Thorne spoke, his voice smooth and reasonable. Your Honors, I understand the Duke's passion. He has uncovered a terrible crime, and he is to be commended for bringing Lord Voss to justice. But to suggest that I, a servant of the Crown for 30 years, would involve myself in such sordid affairs is not only unfounded, it is slanderous. The ledgers, Cassian started. Mention no names, Thorne interrupted. As I have stated repeatedly, the benefactor could be anyone. There is no evidence linking that alias to me. 17 women are prepared to testify. To crimes committed by Voss and his associates, not by me. The judges conferred quietly. Elara realized with creeping horror that Cassian was losing. She pushed forward, ignoring the protests of people she shoved past. Wait! Every head in the hall turned. Cassian's eyes widened. Elara, what the hell? I have evidence, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Evidence that connects Chancellor Thorne to the trafficking network. Thorne's composure slipped for just a second. This is absurd. Who is this girl? My name is Elara Vance. I'm the daughter of Rowan Vance, the knight who served this realm for 20 years, and I was sold into the very network we're discussing today. She pulled back her hood, meeting Thorne's gaze. By my stepmother, Lady Isolde Vance, who received her orders directly from you. The hall erupted. Thorne's face went pale. That is a lie. I have never... You visited my family's estate 3 times in the year before my father's death, Elara continued, her voice shaking but steady. I saw you. I remember. You and Isolde talking in the study, whispering like conspirators. I was 12. I didn't understand then, but I understand now. Circumstantial, Thorne said quickly. A child's memory, twisted by grief and... My father didn't die of fever, Elara said. He was poisoned, and I have a witness who can prove it. She was lying. She didn't have a witness, but she needed to keep him off balance, needed to... Bring forth this witness, the head judge ordered. Elara's heart stopped. She'd bluffed, and now she was trapped. But then, movement at the back of the hall. An old man shuffling forward, gray-haired, stooped, but with sharp eyes. Physician Aldrin, the one who'd treated her father, the one who'd written the report about possible toxin exposure. He was supposed to be dead. He stepped forward, addressing the bench. Your Honors, I am Physician Aldrin Moss. I tended to Sir Rowan Vance in his final days, and I can confirm his death was not natural. Thorne shot to his feet. This is preposterous. This man has been missing for years. Because I feared for my life, Aldrin said calmly. After noting my suspicions in Sir Rowan's medical record, I was approached by men who made it very clear I should keep silent. I fled the capital and have been in hiding ever since. But I kept my notes. All of them. He produced a leather-bound journal, holding it up. The hall fell silent. Cassian stared at Elara. She stared back, just as shocked as he was. The head judge gestured. Approach the bench. Aldrin did. He handed over the journal. The judges read in silence. Minutes crawled by like hours. Finally, the head judge looked up. Chancellor Thorne, in light of this new evidence and the testimony of the survivors, This court finds sufficient cause to... Thorn bolted. He moved fast for a man his age, shoving through the crowd toward a side exit. Guards rushed to intercept, but he pulled a knife, small, hidden, and slashed at anyone who got close. Cassian was faster. He tackled Thorn before he reached the door, slamming him to the marble floor. The knife skittered away. Thorn struggled, but Cassian pinned him with a knee to the spine. "You're done," Cassian said, breathing hard. "It's over." Thorn laughed. It was a horrible sound, choked and bitter. "You think this changes anything? I'm one man. There are dozens like me, hundreds. You can't stop them all." "Maybe not, but I can stop you." The guards hauled Thorn to his feet, clapping him in irons. The head judge stood. "Aldrich Thorn, you are hereby stripped of your position and placed under arrest pending a full investigation. This trial is adjourned." The crowd erupted again, this time in chaos. Some cheering, some shouting, some just stunned into silence. Elara stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Cassian appeared in front of her, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here." "I know." "You lied about having a witness." "I know." "And then a witness showed up anyway." I had no idea he was alive, I swear." Cassian grabbed her shoulders. For a terrifying second, she thought he was going to yell. Instead, he pulled her into a brief, rough hug. "You're insane and reckless, and you probably just saved this entire case." Elara's throat tightened. "We won?" "Not yet, but we're close." He pulled back, his hands still on her shoulders. "Stay close to me. Thorn's people are still out there, and they're going to be furious." As if summoned by his words, a commotion erupted near the entrance. A man in dark clothes burst through the crowd, moving with deadly purpose. He had something in his hand, a vial, glass, filled with liquid that glowed faintly green. Elara saw it happening as if in slow motion. The man drew his arm back, aimed, threw. The vial flew toward the judge's platform, toward Thorn, still in chains, surrounded by guards. But it wasn't going to hit Thorn. It was going to hit Cassian. Elara moved without thinking, shoved him hard, throwing him off balance. The vial shattered on the ground where he'd been standing. Green liquid splashed across the marble. Smoke rose, hissing and acrid. Where it touched, the stone began to dissolve, bubbling and blackened. Acid. The assassin was already running. Guards gave chase, but he disappeared into the panicking crowd. Cassian grabbed Elara, pulling her back from the smoking puddle. "Are you hurt?" "No. You?" "No." He looked at her, something fierce and raw in his expression. "You just..." An explosion rocked the hall. The bronze doors blew inward, ripped from their hinges by a blast of fire and force. People screamed, scrambling over each other to escape. Smoke filled the air, thick and choking. Through the chaos, figures appeared, armed, masked, moving with military precision. Thorn's people. They'd come to finish what the assassin started, and Elara and Cassian were trapped right in the middle of it. Cassian's hand went to his sword the second the smoke cleared enough to see shapes moving through it. "Stay behind me," he barked at Elara. She didn't argue. For once, the masked figures fanned out through the hall with military efficiency. 6, maybe 8 of them, hard to tell through the chaos. People were screaming, trampling each other to reach the side exits. The judges had vanished behind their platform. Guards were shouting contradictory orders, some trying to protect the crowd, others forming a defensive line around Thorn. One of the attackers raised a crossbow. Cassian shoved Elara down behind a toppled bench just as the bolt whistled overhead, embedding itself in a marble column with a crack that echoed like thunder. "They're not here for Thorn," Cassian said, breathing hard. "They're here for us." "How do you know?" "Because that bolt was aimed at you." Her stomach lurched. Another explosion, smaller this time, near the back of the hall. More smoke. More screaming. These weren't just assassins. This was a coordinated assault designed to cause maximum chaos while they picked off targets. Gareth appeared through the smoke, sword drawn, blood running down his face from a cut above his eye. "Your Grace, we need to get you out of here." "What about the survivors?" Cassian demanded. "The women who testified, where are they?" Captain Mira got them out through the servants' passage. "They're safe." Gareth ducked as another crossbow bolt sailed past. "But we won't be if we don't move. Now!" Cassian grabbed Elara's arm and hauled her to her feet. They ran, not toward the main doors. Those were a death trap, bodies piled up from the stampede. Cassian led them through a side corridor, Gareth covering their rear. The sounds of fighting echoed behind them, steel on steel, screams, the ugly, wet sounds of violence. They burst into a narrow hallway lined with administrative offices. Empty. For now. Cassian slammed a door shut behind them and wedged a chair under the handle. That'll hold them for maybe 30 seconds. We need another way out. There's a back stair, Gareth said, pointing. Leads down to the archives. From there we can reach the street. Do it. They took the stairs 2 at a time, Elara struggling to keep up. Her lungs burned, her legs felt like lead, but she kept moving because stopping meant dying. The archives were a maze of shelves and scrolls and dust. Cassian navigated by instinct, turning left, then right, then left again. Behind them, she heard the door crash open. Footsteps. Voices. They're coming, she gasped. I know. They reached another door, this one leading out to an alley. Cassian kicked it open and they spilled out into gray daylight and the stench of the city. The alley was narrow, flanked by high walls. No obvious exits except the way they'd come and the street at the far end. Cassian drew his sword. Gareth, get her to the safe house. I'll hold them off. Your Grace, you can't. That's an order. Gareth hesitated, then grabbed Elara's wrist. Come on. Wait. Elara twisted, looking back at Cassian. You can't fight them all alone. I've fought worse odds. He didn't look at her, kept his eyes on the door they'd just come through. Go, now. Cassian, go! Gareth dragged her away. She fought him every step, but he was stronger. They reached the end of the alley just as she heard the door slam open behind them, heard Cassian shout, heard steel clashing. Then they were in the street, swallowed by the crowd, and she couldn't see him anymore. The safe house was a nondescript building in the merchant quarter. 3 stories, narrow windows, a door that looked like it hadn't been painted in a decade. Gareth pounded on it twice, paused, then 3 times more. A code. The door cracked open. Captain Mira's face appeared. Inside. Fast. They stumbled in. Mira slammed the door and bolted it. The room was packed. The 17 survivors huddled together near a fireplace, looking terrified. Marcus was there too, along with half a dozen of Cassian's soldiers, all armed and looking ready for another fight. Where's the Duke? Mira demanded. He stayed behind, Gareth said. Held the rear so we could escape. Mira swore. Idiot. Brave idiot, but still an idiot. Elara's hands were shaking. She clenched them into fists. We have to go back for him. We can't. Not yet. Mira gestured to the survivors. We've got civilians to protect. The second we step outside, Thorne's people will be on us. Thorne's in chains, and his network isn't. You think those attackers acted alone? They had inside help, probably half the city guard. Mira's expression was grim. We're trapped here until we figure out who we can trust. So we just, hide? While Cassian's out there fighting? While Cassian does what he does best, Mira corrected. Survive. Elara wanted to scream, wanted to punch something, but she forced herself to breathe, to think. They couldn't stay here indefinitely. Sooner or later, Thorne's people would track them down, and when they did, they'd be cornered, unless they turned the tables first. We need to go public, Elara said suddenly. Everyone turned to stare at her. What? Marcus asked. We need to make this so public that Thorne's allies can't sweep it under the rug. Get the word out, about the trial, about the attack, about everything. She looked at Marcus. You're a spy master. You have contacts, right? People who spread information? Yes, but use them, now. I want every tavern, every market square, every street corner in this city talking about what happened today. I want everyone to know that Chancellor Thorne tried to murder a duke in open court, that his people attacked the Hall of Justice, that he's a criminal and a monster. Marcus frowned. That could work. Public outrage might force the king's hand, but it'll take time. Well, then start now. Mira was studying her with something that might have been respect. That's not a bad plan, but it doesn't solve our immediate problem. We're still trapped. Not if we give them a reason to come here on our terms. You want to bait them? I want to control the battlefield. Elara turned to the survivors. They were watching her with wide, frightened eyes. I need to ask you something, and you can say no. All of you can. But if you're willing, I think we can end this tonight. One of the girls, Sarah, the one Elara had spoken to back at the keep, spoke up. What do you need? Witnesses, again, but not in a courtroom. In the streets. I want you to stand in the main square and tell your stories, out loud, where everyone can hear. The room went silent. You're asking them to paint targets on themselves, Mira said quietly. I'm asking them to take back their voices, to make sure the world knows what was done to them, and to prove that we're not afraid. Elara met Sarah's gaze. But only if you want to. I meant what I said. You can say no. Sarah looked at the others. They whispered among themselves, a low murmur of fear and anger and something else, something harder. Finally, Sarah turned back. We'll do it. Are you sure? We're already targets. Might as well make it count. Elara felt something crack open in her chest. Gratitude, maybe, or hope. Thank you. Mira shook her head. This is insane. You have a better idea? No, which is why I hate it. Mira turned to her soldiers. All right, if we're doing this, we do it right. I want every man we have in that square armed and ready. Marcus, start spreading the word. Trial interrupted, Duke attacked, survivors speaking out. Make it loud. On it. Marcus disappeared into a back room. Gareth looked sick. If this goes wrong, then we die fighting instead of hiding, Mira said flatly. Wouldn't be the worst way to go. They moved out an hour later, after Marcus had sent his network into motion. The main square was massive. Cobblestones, a fountain at the center, surrounded by buildings on all sides. At this hour, it should have been full of merchants closing up shop, citizens heading home. Instead, it was packed. Word had spread fast. Hundreds of people, maybe 1,000, all crammed together, murmuring and restless. Mira's soldiers formed a perimeter around the fountain. The survivors stood at the center, huddled together. Elara stood with them. Mira climbed onto the edge of the fountain, raising her voice to carry. People of the capital, you've heard rumors today about the trial, about the attack. I'm here to tell you, it's all true. The crowd surged closer, shouting questions. Chancellor Aldrich Thorne, Mira continued, has been arrested for trafficking, bribery, and conspiracy, but his allies are still free, and they attacked the Hall of Justice to silence the truth. To silence these women. She gestured to the survivors. They don't want you to hear what happened. They don't want you to know how deep this rot goes. But we're not going to let them bury it. These women are going to speak, and you're going to listen. Mira stepped down. Sarah stepped up. The girl looked terrified. Her hands shook, but when she spoke, her voice carried. My name is Sarah. I'm 16 years old. 2 years ago, I was taken from my village by men who said they'd give me work in the city. They locked me in a cellar. They sold me, again and again. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. And when I tried to run, they beat me until I couldn't stand. They told me no one would believe me, that I was nothing. The square was dead silent. But they were wrong, because I'm standing here, and I'm telling you this happened, and it happened to dozens of us. Maybe hundreds. And the people responsible aren't criminals hiding in shadows. They're nobles, officials, people you trusted. She pointed into the crowd. And if you let them get away with it, it'll happen again. She stepped down, shaking. Another girl stepped up. Then another. One by one, they told their stories. Elara watched the crowd, saw anger, saw horror, saw people crying, swearing, shouting for justice. It was working. And then she saw something else. Movement at the edge of the square, figures in dark cloaks pushing through the crowd, armed. Thorne's people. Mira saw them too. Weapons up! The soldiers drew swords, the crowd panicked, people shoving and screaming, trying to get away. The attackers charged. What followed was chaos. Steel flashed in the fading light. Mira's soldiers met the attackers head-on, forming a wall between them and the survivors. Elara grabbed Sarah and the others, pulling them back toward the fountain. Civilians scattered, trampling each other in their desperation to escape. One of the attackers broke through the line, heading straight for Elara. She didn't have a weapon, didn't have training, just instinct. She grabbed a loose cobblestone from the ground and hurled it. It caught the attacker in the face. He stumbled, cursing. One of Mira's soldiers finished him. Another attacker. Another desperate scramble. Elara shoved Sarah behind her, picked up a fallen dagger, held it with shaking hands. The attacker laughed. "You don't even know how to hold that, girl." He was right. He lunged. Elara closed her eyes and swung wildly. She felt the blade connect, felt resistance, then wetness. Opened her eyes to see the man on his knees, clutching his side, blood pouring between his fingers. She dropped the dagger like it had burned her. First time, Mira appeared beside her, dispatching the wounded attacker with brutal efficiency. Gets easier. I don't want it to get easier. Too bad. Now move. The fight was turning. Cassian's soldiers were outnumbered, but they were trained, disciplined, and the crowd was starting to fight back. Citizens picked up stones, sticks, anything they could find, threw them at the attackers. Some even grabbed dropped weapons and joined the fray. Elara saw an old man, had to be 70, swing a cane at an attacker's knees. Saw a merchant woman brain someone with a frying pan. Saw the city itself rise up in fury. And then she saw him. Cassian. He appeared at the far end of the square, covered in blood and soot, limping but alive. Behind him were more soldiers. Reinforcements from the keep, she realized. He'd gone back for help. He caught her eye across the chaos. Didn't smile, just nodded. Then he waded into the fight like an avenging ghost. It was over in minutes. The remaining attackers either fled or were cut down. The crowd cheered, ragged, breathless, but genuine. Mira's soldiers secured the square, dragging prisoners away. Cassian made his way to Elara, breathing hard. "You all right?" "I stabbed someone." "Good. I feel like I'm going to throw up." Also normal. He looked around at the square, at the survivors still standing by the fountain, at the crowd, buzzing with energy, at the bodies being cleared away. What the hell happened here? "We went public," Elara said. "Figured if we couldn't hide, we might as well make noise." That's, he shook his head, actually brilliant and completely reckless. I learned from the best. Something that might have been a smile ghosted across his face. Then he turned to Mira. "Casualties? 3 dead, 7 wounded. Could have been worse. It's about to get better." Cassian gestured toward the edge of the square. A contingent of royal guards was approaching, 50 men in the king's colors, led by an officer in ornate armor. The crowd parted. The officer stopped in front of Cassian and saluted. "Duke Drake, His Majesty has sent me to secure the city. Chancellor Thorne has been remanded to the royal dungeon pending execution. The king extends his gratitude for your service to the realm." Cassian blinked. "The king knows what happened?" "The entire city knows what happened, Your Grace. These people made sure of it." The officer nodded toward the survivors. "His Majesty is embarrassed and furious. He's ordered a full investigation into everyone connected to Thorne's network. No one is exempt." "About time," Mira muttered. The officer continued. "He also wishes to meet the women who testified, to hear their stories himself, and to ensure they are protected and compensated for what they've endured." Sarah stepped forward. "We'll meet with him, on one condition." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" "We want it public. No closed-door meetings. We've spent too long being hidden. If the king wants to hear us, everyone hears us." The officer looked uncertain. "I'll relay that to His Majesty." "You do that," Sarah said. Elara felt a surge of pride, so fierce it almost hurt. The next day, the entire capital turned out for the public audience. The king, an old man with tired eyes and a voice that shook, sat on a dais in the main square, the same square where the battle had taken place. Around him stood his advisors, nobles, magistrates, and in front of him, one by one, the survivors spoke. They didn't hold back, didn't soften their words, told the truth in all its ugly, brutal detail. The king listened. When they finished, he stood. "I have failed you," he said simply. "I trusted the wrong people, ignored the signs, let evil flourish in my own house." He paused. "I cannot undo what has been done, but I can ensure it never happens again. Effective immediately, I am establishing a commission to investigate all trafficking networks in the realm. Any official found complicit will be removed and tried, and I am creating a fund to be drawn from the seized assets of Thorne and his conspirators to provide aid to survivors." The crowd erupted in applause. It wasn't enough. Elara knew that. Money and commissions couldn't erase what had been done, but it was a start. Cassian stood beside her, arms crossed. Think he'll follow through? He'd better, or we'll make him. She glanced at him. You look terrible. Thanks. You look like you haven't slept in a week. I haven't. Same. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the king speak with the survivors, watching the crowd cheer and weep, and slowly, tentatively, begin to believe that maybe, just maybe, justice was possible. What happens now? Elara asked. Trials. Lots of them. Executions. Lots of those too. Cassian shrugged. Cleaning up this mess is going to take months, maybe years. And after? After? He looked at her. I don't know. Haven't thought that far ahead. You should. You're a hero now. People are going to expect things from you. I'm not a hero. I'm just tired. Heroes usually are. He snorted. What about you? What are you going to do? Elara had been thinking about that. A lot. I want to help with the commission, with the survivors, make sure this actually changes things. Not just go back to, she gestured vaguely, whatever life was before. There is no before. Not anymore. I know. They were interrupted by Marcus, who appeared with a stack of papers. Your Grace, you need to sign these warrants for the remaining conspirators. The kings approve them all. Cassian took the papers, scanning them. His expression hardened. Isolde Vance is on here. Elara's stomach clenched. She's been arrested, Marcus continued, charged with conspiracy, accessory to trafficking, and pending further investigation, suspected involvement in the murder of Rowan Vance. Murder, Elara repeated. The word felt heavy. Physician Aldrin's testimony was compelling. Combined with Voss's confession and the financial records, there's enough to bring formal charges. Marcus looked at her. You'll be called to testify against your stepmother. Good. Cassian studied her. You sure you're ready for that? No, but I'm doing it anyway. He signed the warrants. That night, Elara stood on the balcony of the guest quarters Cassian had secured for her in the capital, much nicer than the room at the keep, with a view of the city lights spreading out like stars. She heard footsteps behind her, didn't turn. Can't sleep? Cassian asked. Too much thinking. He joined her at the railing. About? My father. What he'd think of all this. She paused. I keep wondering if he'd be proud or horrified. Probably both. Parents are complicated that way. Did you know yours? My mother, briefly. She died when I was 8. My father, he shook his head. He was a bastard, literal and figurative. Taught me that power matters more than kindness. Spent most of my life trying to prove him wrong. Did you? Ask me in another 20 years. They stood in silence. Thank you, Elara said quietly. For everything. For saving me, for believing me, for not giving up when everyone else would have. Don't thank me. You did most of the work. We did it together. He didn't argue. Somewhere in the city, bells chimed midnight. A new day, a new beginning. Cassian pushed off the railing. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start the real work. Which is? Making sure this sticks. Making sure the people who enabled Thorn don't just disappear into the shadows. Making sure the system actually changes. He met her eyes. Think you're up for it? Elara smiled. A real smile. The first in what felt like forever. Try and stop me. He almost smiled back. Wouldn't dream of it. He left her there, standing under the stars, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, not yet, but something close. Hope. Hope, as it turned out, required a hell of a lot of paperwork. The trials began 2 weeks later, stretching across the winter like a scar that refused to heal. Every morning, Elara walked to the Hall of Justice, rebuilt now, the damage from the attack patched over but still visible if you knew where to look. Every morning, she sat in the gallery and watched as the network Thorn had built was dismantled piece by piece. Some days were easier than others. The day they convicted Lord Merrick Voss, she felt nothing. The man was a shell by then, broken and mumbling, barely present. When the judge read the sentence, death by hanging, he didn't even react, just stared at the floor like he'd already left his body. The day they convicted 3 magistrates who'd taken bribes to ignore trafficking reports, she felt sick. These were men who'd sworn oaths to protect people, who'd looked survivors in the eye and told them there was nothing to be done. Watching them squirm and make excuses made her want to scream. But the hardest day was the one she'd been dreading since this whole thing started. The trial of Isolde Vance. They brought her into the courtroom in chains, and Elara barely recognized her. Isolde had always been vain, obsessed with her appearance, her clothes, her status. Now she looked like something dragged from a grave, hair unwashed and gray, skin sallow, eyes hollow. She spotted Elara in the gallery, and her expression twisted into something between rage and desperation. "You," she hissed. "You did this. You ruined everything." The guard shoved her forward. Cassian sat beside Elara, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You don't have to stay," he said quietly. "You can leave. No one would blame you." "I'm staying." Elara, I said I'm staying. She kept her eyes on Isolde. "I need to see this." The trial was brutal. Marcus presented the evidence methodically. Financial records showing Isolde's debts to Voss. Letters arranging Elara's sale. Testimony from Grevin, the merchant who'd left her in the snow, who'd turned informant to save his own skin. And then, the worst part, physician Aldrin's testimony about Rowan Vance's death. The symptoms were inconsistent with fever, Aldrin said, his voice steady despite his age. Rapid deterioration, hemorrhaging, seizures in the final hours. I noted my suspicions in his medical record, but I was told strongly to amend my findings. "Who told you this?" the prosecutor asked. "Lady Isolde Vance. She visited me the day after her husband's death, offered me money to change my report. When I refused, she left. 2 days later, men came to my home, said if I spoke about my suspicions, I'd regret it." Aldrin's hands shook. "I fled that night. I've been in hiding ever since." "And you believe Sir Rowan was poisoned?" "I'm certain of it." The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order. Isolde screamed that it was all lies, that Aldrin was a senile fool, that Elara had put him up to this. No one listened. When it was Elara's turn to testify, she walked to the stand on legs that felt like water. The prosecutor was a thin woman with sharp eyes. "Lady Vance, please describe your relationship with your stepmother." Elara's mouth was dry. "She married my father when I was 10. For the first year she was nice, or pretended to be. But after my father died, everything changed." "How so?" "She stopped pretending, started selling off his possessions, fired the servants he'd trusted, isolated me." Elara's voice cracked. "She told me I was a burden, that my father had left us in debt because of me. That I owed her." "Did she ever threaten you?" "Constantly. If I didn't do what she wanted, chores, errands, staying out of sight when she had guests, she'd lock me in my room, sometimes for days." "And when did she decide to sell you?" Elara looked at Isolde. The woman was staring at her with pure hatred. 3 months ago. She told me she'd found a solution to her debts, that I should be grateful she'd kept me as long as she had. Then she sold me to a merchant for 20 gold pieces. 20 gold, the prosecutor repeated, letting it hang in the air. "And did she express any regret? Any hesitation?" "No, she told me I was finally being useful." The prosecutor nodded. "Thank you, Lady Vance. No further questions." Isolde's defense attorney stood, a weaselly man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Lady Vance, isn't it true that you and your stepmother had a contentious relationship?" "Yes." "And isn't it possible that your testimony is colored by personal animosity?" "My testimony is colored by the fact that she sold me like livestock." "But you can't prove she intended harm, can you? Perhaps she believed she was placing you in a position where you'd be cared for. She left me to freeze to death in the snow." Elara's voice was steel. "If that's her idea of care, then she's even worse than I thought." The attorney flinched. No further questions. The verdict came 3 days later. Guilty on all counts. Conspiracy to traffic, accessory to murder, fraud, theft. The judge read the sentence without emotion. "Isolde Vance, you are hereby stripped of all titles and properties. Your assets will be seized and distributed to your victims. And you are sentenced to life imprisonment in the Crown's deepest dungeon, where you will remain until death." Isolde screamed, lunged at Elara. The guards caught her, dragged her away. "You'll rot," she shrieked. "You hear me? You'll rot without me. You're nothing. Your father would be ashamed." Elara sat very still. hands folded in her lap. Cassian leaned over. "You all right? Ask me later." They took Isolde away. The courtroom emptied slowly, people filing out in uncomfortable silence. Elara didn't move. "She's wrong, you know," Cassian said after a while. "About your father. He'd be proud." "How do you know?" "Because I knew him, and I know you." He stood, offering his hand. "Come on, let's get out of here." She took it. The executions happened in the central square, same place where the survivors had spoken. Elara didn't attend. Couldn't bring herself to watch men hang, even men who deserved it, but she heard the crowd from her room, first cheers, then jeers, then a silence that felt heavier than both. Cassian found her afterward, looking grim. "It's done," he said simply. "All of them?" "Thorn, Voss, 12 others. The rest are in cells." He sat down heavily. "I thought I'd feel something. Relief, maybe. Satisfaction. But I just feel tired." "That's because killing doesn't fix things. It just stops the bleeding." Poetic. My father used to say that. After battles. She looked at him. "What happens now? To the survivors?" "The King's Fund is operational. Each woman gets compensation, enough to start over, buy a home, learn a trade. Some are staying in the capital. Others are going back to their families." He paused. "Sarah's staying. Wants to work with the commission, make sure this doesn't happen again. She's braver than I am." "Doubtful." They sat in silence for a while. "What about you?" Elara asked. "What happens to the Duke of Dramar now that the war's over?" "This war, maybe. There are always others." He looked tired, older than his years. "The king wants me to oversee the commission, make sure the reforms actually stick. It's going to be a mess. Nobles pushing back, officials dragging their feet, people trying to water down the laws until they're meaningless." "Sounds exhausting." "It is. But someone has to do it." He glanced at her. "You could help, if you wanted." "Me? You've got a brain. And you're angrier than I am, which is saying something. Plus the survivors trust you. That matters." Elara thought about it. About going back to Greystone Manor, except there was nothing to go back to. The estate had been seized, sold off. The Solda and Tavin were gone. Her father's legacy was buried under years of rot. Or she could stay, fight. Make sure the system that destroyed her family couldn't destroy anyone else's. "All right," she said. "I'll help." Cassian nodded. "Good. You start tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" "No time like the present." She laughed despite herself. "You're a slave driver." "I prefer motivational." The work was brutal. Elara spent her days buried in reports, testimonies, proposals for new laws. She met with magistrates who smiled to her face and undermined the commission behind closed doors. She argued with nobles who insisted that trafficking was a regional issue that didn't require heavy-handed intervention. She attended hearings where lawyers tried to paint victims as liars and conspirators as misunderstood. It was infuriating, exhausting, and absolutely necessary. Cassian was right beside her through all of it, a constant presence. He taught her how to navigate politics, when to push, when to compromise, when to plant your feet and refuse to budge. He introduced her to allies, warned her about enemies, and pulled her back when she was about to do something stupid. "You can't call a magistrate a spineless worm in open session," he said after one particularly heated meeting. "Why not? He is one." "But because then he'll spend the next 6 months blocking everything we try to do out of spite. Politics isn't about being right, it's about winning." "That's depressing." "Welcome to governance." But there were victories too. 3 months after the trials, the king signed the Anti-Trafficking Act into law. It established harsher penalties for traffickers, mandatory reporting requirements for officials, and protections for survivors. It wasn't perfect. Compromises had been made, loopholes existed, but it was a start. The day the law passed, Elara stood in the square with Sarah and the other survivors, watching the proclamation being read aloud. "This is because of you," Sarah said quietly. "All of you. You made them listen." "We made them listen," Elara corrected. "You stood up. You spoke. We just amplified it." Sarah smiled. It was small, tentative, but real. That night, there was a celebration at the keep. Cassian's idea, though he pretended to hate the whole thing. Food, wine, music. People actually laughing for the first time in months. Elara found him on the battlements, staring out at the mountains like he always did when he needed to think. "You're missing your own party," she said. "It's not my party. It's theirs." He gestured vaguely toward the hall below. "They earned it. So did you." He shrugged. "I just did my job." "Your job was maintaining order and crushing rebellions. This," she gestured around, "this was a choice. You chose to care." "Don't make me sound noble. I'm not." "I know. You're stubborn and grumpy and you threaten people too much, but you're also the man who stopped in a snowstorm to save a girl he didn't know, who risked his title and his life to take down a corrupt system, who gave survivors a voice when everyone else wanted them silent." She stepped closer. "You're a lot of things, Cassian, but you're not unnoble." He looked at her for a long moment. "You're different than you were. So are you." "I'm exactly the same." "Liar." He almost smiled. "Maybe a little different." They stood there side by side, watching the snow fall over the mountains. "What happens now?" Elara asked. "For us, I mean. We keep working, keep fighting, keep making sure this sticks." He paused. "Unless you're tired of it. I'd understand if you wanted to do something else. Build a life that isn't just this." "Is that what you want?" "I don't know what I want anymore. I used to know exactly who I was. A soldier, a duke, a weapon. But now," he trailed off. "Now I'm not sure." "Maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe not knowing means you get to choose." "And what would you choose?" he asked. "If you could do anything." Elara thought about it. Really thought. "I'd want a home. A real one, not just a place I happen to live. I'd want work that matters. People I trust. A life that's mine, not something handed to me or taken from me." "That sounds nice. What about you?" Cassian was quiet for a long time. "I think I'd want the same. A home. Work that matters. People I don't have to keep at arm's length because I'm afraid they'll get hurt." He looked at her. "Someone who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm being an ass." That's a short list. Very short. Something passed between them, unspoken, fragile, new. "Cassian, I know. It's complicated. You've been through hell, I'm technically your employer, and we've got about 1,000 reasons why this is a terrible idea." "That's not what I was going to say." He blinked. "What were you going to say?" "I was going to say that I don't care. About the complications. About the reasons." She stepped closer. "You saved my life. And I think maybe I saved yours too in a different way. And if that's not a foundation for something, I don't know what is." Cassian stared at her. For once, he looked genuinely lost for words. Then he did something she'd never seen him do before. He smiled. A real smile. Not the ghost of one or the bitter twist he usually managed. It transformed his whole face, made him look younger, lighter. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met," he said, "or the most reckless." "Can I be both?" "You absolutely are." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His hand cupped her face, rough and warm. "This is still a terrible idea," he murmured. "I know. We're going to regret it. Probably. And people are going to talk. Let them." He kissed her then, careful at first, like he was afraid she might break. But she kissed him back with everything she had, all the fear and anger and hope of the past months pouring into it, and careful became something else entirely. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Cassian rested his forehead against hers. "Still think this is a good idea?" he asked. "Ask me in a few years." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." He laughed, quiet and surprised and completely genuine. Below them, music drifted up from the hall. Above them, stars burned cold and clear, and between them, something new began. The spring came slowly, thawing the snow inch by stubborn inch. Elara stood in the gardens of Draymar Keep, watching new growth push through the dead earth. Tiny green shoots, fragile but determined. Cassian appeared beside her, holding 2 mugs of something that smelled like coffee and regret. "Marcus just sent word," he said, handing her a mug. "The last of Thorne's conspirators was arrested, a magistrate in the southern province. He's being transported to the capital for trial." "How many does that make?" 47, total. He sipped his coffee. The network's dismantled. Finished. We won. It doesn't feel like winning. It never does. Not really. He looked at the garden. But it's better than the alternative. She leaned against him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. They'd gotten better at this. The small touches, the quiet moments. Still awkward sometimes, still figuring it out. But real. The king wants to honor you, Cassian said after a while. Formal ceremony, title, land, the whole thing. I don't want a title. I told him you'd say that. What did he say? That you're as stubborn as I am, which he meant as an insult, but I took as a compliment. Elara smiled. What do you want me to say? I want you to do whatever makes you happy. If that's accepting a title and land, fine. If it's telling the king to shove it and running off to the countryside, also fine. And if it's staying here, working with you, then I'd say I'm a lucky bastard. She turned to face him. I want to stay. Not because of the work or the commission or any of that. I want to stay because this... She gestured around. This feels like home. You feel like home. Cassian's expression softened. You feel like home too. Even when I'm being stubborn and reckless, especially then. They kissed, slow and sweet, tasting like coffee and new beginnings. When they finally pulled apart, Cassian had that look he got when he was about to say something important. What? Elara asked. Marry me. She blinked. What? Marry me. Not now. We've got time. But eventually. When you're ready. He was fumbling his words completely unlike himself. I'm not good at this. At feelings. At saying what I mean. But I know that I don't want to spend the rest of my life without you. And I know that's selfish, and you've got your whole life ahead of you, and you could do so much better. She kissed him again, hard enough to shut him up. Yes, she said when they broke apart. Yes? Yes, eventually, when we're ready. She smiled. You're right. You're terrible at this. I warned you. And I'm saying yes anyway. What does that say about me? That you're either brave or insane. Both. Definitely both. They stood there in the garden, holding each other, while the world slowly woke up around them. The ceremony happened a month later. The king himself presided, which was unusual and slightly terrifying. He looked old up close, tired in a way that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with the weight of the crown. But when he spoke, his voice was strong. We are gathered to honor those who stood against darkness when others looked away, who fought for justice when it was neither easy nor safe, who reminded us that power without conscience is tyranny. He turned to Elara. Lady Elara Vance, step forward. She did, heart pounding. You were wronged by the very system meant to protect you, yet you did not retreat into bitterness. Instead, you stood, you spoke, you fought, and in doing so, you changed the course of this realm. He held up a scroll. It is my honor to restore your family's title and estate, to grant you lands and income befitting your station, and to name you an official advisor to the crown on matters of justice and reform. The crowd applauded. Elara accepted the scroll with shaking hands. Your Majesty, I'm honored, but I don't want lands or titles. I want the resources to help people like me, to make sure the reforms stick, to build something that lasts. The king studied her. Then he smiled, a real smile, warm and approving. Spoken like your father. Very well. The lands and income are yours to use as you see fit. Build your something that lasts. She bowed. Thank you, Your Majesty. He turned to Cassian next. Duke Dryke, you have served this realm with distinction for 2 decades. You have led armies, quelled rebellions, and maintained order in the darkest times. But your greatest service was not on the battlefield. It was here, standing for the powerless, demanding justice, refusing to accept corruption as inevitable. He paused. I am naming you High Chancellor. It's a position that carries great responsibility and even greater burden. Do you accept? Cassian looked genuinely surprised. Your Majesty, It's not a request, Duke. It's an order. Someone needs to make sure the next Chancellor doesn't turn out like the last. I can't think of anyone better. Cassian glanced at Elara. She nodded. "I accept," he said finally. The crowd erupted. That night there was another celebration, this one bigger, louder, full of nobles and officials who'd fought them every step of the way, but now wanted to be seen supporting the victors. Elara hated it. She slipped away halfway through, finding refuge on the same battlements where Cassian had proposed. The city spread out below, lights twinkling like stars brought to earth. Footsteps behind her. She didn't turn. "You know you're the guest of honor, right?" Cassian said. "You're supposed to stay at the party." "You left too." "I'm allowed. I'm terrible at parties." "So am I, apparently." He joined her at the railing. "Having second thoughts?" "About what?" "All of it. The title. The work. Me." "Not about you. Never about you." She took his hand. "But sometimes I wonder if any of this is real. If I'm going to wake up and still be that girl freezing in the snow." "You're not. That girl's gone." "Is she? Or is she just buried under everything that came after?" Cassian turned her to face him. "Listen to me. You survived. You fought. You won. That's not burying who you were. That's becoming who you were always meant to be." "And who's that?" "Someone extraordinary." She wanted to argue, to say she was just ordinary, just someone who got lucky. But looking at him, at the conviction in his eyes, she almost believed it. "What about you?" she asked. "Who are you now?" "I don't know yet, but I'm figuring it out." He smiled. "With your help." They stood there for a long time, holding each other against the cold. Below them, the city hummed with life, people going about their business, unaware that two people on a distant battlement had helped reshape their world. "We should go back," Cassian said eventually, "before they send a search party. Or we could stay here." "Tempting, but Marcus will have my head if I miss my own coronation as High Chancellor." "That's not until tomorrow." "Exactly. He'll still find a way to blame me." Elara laughed. "Fine, let's go face the masses." They walked back together, hand in hand. The months that followed were hard. The commission faced resistance at every turn. Officials dragged their feet. Nobles pulled strings. Reforms got watered down, delayed, sabotaged, but they kept fighting. Elara built a network of safe houses for survivors, funded by her estate's income, places where women could heal, learn trades, start over. Sarah ran the largest one, fierce and uncompromising. Cassian wielded his new authority like a scalpel, cutting out corruption, replacing compromised officials, forcing the system to bend toward justice even when it didn't want to. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and frustrating and sometimes felt like pushing a boulder uphill. But it was working. A year after the trials, Elara stood in the garden again. Her garden now, attached to the house she'd bought on the edge of the capital. It was small compared to Greystone Manor, but it was hers. Cassian found her there, dirt under her fingernails from planting roses. "You're going to ruin your dress," he said. "It's already ruined. I'm planting." "I can see that." He crouched beside her. "Any particular reason you're planting roses in November?" "My father loved roses, said they were stubborn enough to bloom even when everything else died." She patted down the soil. "Figured it was appropriate." "Very appropriate." They worked in silence for a while, him helping despite his complete lack of gardening skill. "I got a letter from the king," Cassian said eventually. "He wants to expand the commission, make it a permanent department, more funding, more authority." "That's good, isn't it?" "It's great. It means this might actually last." He paused. "But it also means more work, more time, more fights." "Are you asking if I'm still in?" "I'm asking if you're okay with this being our life. Fighting bureaucrats instead of armies, dealing with politics instead of swords. It's not exactly glamorous." Elara sat back, wiping her hands on her already ruined dress. "You know what I learned this year?" "What?" "That glamorous is overrated. My whole life I watched people chase titles and status and all this meaningless shine, and it made them hollow, made them cruel." She looked at him. "This work? It's hard and frustrating, and sometimes I want to scream. But it matters. We're actually helping people, changing things. That's worth more than all the glamour in the world." Cassian smiled, the real smile, the one that still surprised her every time. "You're something else. You know that? So you keep telling me." "Because it's true." They finished planting as the sun set, painting the garden gold and orange. 2 years later, they were married in the same garden, roses blooming despite the late season. It was small, just close friends, the survivors who'd become family, a handful of trusted officials. No pomp, no ceremony, just vows spoken honestly, under an open sky. Sarah was there, grinning wide. "Never thought I'd see the day the Frost Duke got married." "Neither did I," Cassian admitted. "You're good for him," she told Elara. "Keep him honest." "I try." Marcus gave a speech that was equal parts heartfelt and sarcastic. Mira got drunk and told embarrassing stories about Cassian's early days as a captain. Gareth actually cried during the vows. It was messy and chaotic and absolutely perfect. That night, alone in their house, Elara and Cassian sat by the fire. "Think we'll look back on this and wonder what we were thinking?" she asked. "Definitely." "But you don't regret it?" "Not even a little." He pulled her closer. "You?" "No regrets, just gratitude." "For what?" "For you, for this, for being given a second chance when I thought I was out of chances." She rested her head on his shoulder. "For everything. You gave yourself that second chance. I just happened to be there." "You were more than there. You were the reason I survived long enough to fight." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Outside, the city slept. Inside, two people who'd been forged in fire found peace. Years later, when people asked Elara about that winter, about being sold, about nearly dying, about everything that came after, she'd tell them the truth. That it was the worst thing that ever happened to her. And also the best. Because it broke her open and forced her to rebuild herself into something stronger. Because it showed her what she was capable of when she stopped accepting the world as it was and started fighting for what it should be. Because it brought her to Cassian and to a life that was hers in a way nothing had ever been before. The snow would come again, year after year. But Elara had learned something that first winter, bleeding into the cold. That even in the darkest freeze, even when everything seemed dead and done, something could survive. Something stubborn and fierce and unwilling to quit. And sometimes, if you were lucky, if you fought hard enough, that something could bloom.